Hey guys, Mr. Backerberg here. In this video, we're going to look at extraneous solutions of equations. So in this example, we're going to look at solving this equation, 2x over x minus 1 plus 1 over x minus 3 equals 2 over x squared minus 4x plus 3. But what's going to happen as we go through the process of solving this equation is we're actually going to end up with an extraneous solution. Meaning that one of the answers that we get as we go through this process won't actually work in the original equation. So it's not an actual solution to the equation. Now as we're looking at this, we've got a lot of fractions. So I want to think about multiplying by something that's going to help us get rid of all of those fractions. But I want to start on the right-hand side with that quadratic in the denominator. And I want to look at the factored out version of that. So if we were to factor out this x squared minus 4x plus 3, we would get x minus 3 and x minus 1, which works out nicely because that's the denominators that we have on the left-hand side. So as we're thinking about doing our multiplication to get rid of all of our fractions, to get rid of this x minus 1 on the bottom of our first fraction, we're going to need to multiply by x minus 1. But since we have another fraction with a different denominator, the x minus 3, we're also going to have to multiply by that in order to help us cancel out that fraction. So we're multiplying by both the x minus 1 and the x minus 3, and that's actually going to help us cancel out both pieces on the right-hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the x minus 1 and the x minus 3 and multiply them to the first fraction. Now notice the first fraction is being divided by x minus 1. So those terms will cancel each other out. The 2x will still be in there, and the x minus 3 will still be in there because we didn't cancel out that term. Now when we multiply this stuff by the second fraction, that 1 over x minus 3, the x minus 3's will cancel each other out, but the 1 from the numerator will still be there, and the x minus 1 will still be in there. And then if I take the x minus 1 and the x minus 3 times the fraction on the right-hand side, remember the denominator was x minus 3 times x minus 1. So actually both of those terms are going to cancel out, and all we're going to have left over is the 2. Now I'm going to take care of cleaning up the left-hand side by doing some distributive property first. So the 2x times x is 2x squared, and 2x times negative 3 is negative 6x. And then here, if I'm distributing 1, that's not really going to change anything. So this is going to be plus x minus 1 equals 2. Now I can combine some like terms. So I get 2x squared minus 5x minus 1 equals 2. But I'm also going to subtract that 2 over to the left-hand side. So we're going to get 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Now as we're looking at this quadratic, it is actually factorable. This would factor into 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. So if I set those equal to 0, on this first one I would have to subtract the 1 over and then divide by the 2, so I would get x equals negative 1/2. And on this last one I would have to add that 3 over to the right-hand side, so I get x equals 3. Now as I'm looking at these answers and looking back at my original equation, I'm going to focus on the x value of 3. And if we look at the second fraction within our equation, if we try to plug in 3, we're going to get 0 on the bottom of that fraction, meaning that this x equals 3 doesn't work within the original equation. So x equals 3 is an extraneous solution, so it's not actually a solution. But if we try to plug the negative 1/2 back into our equation, that one will work. So the only actual answer in here is x equals negative 1/2. That's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching.